Okay, guys, so if you've been following my content for the past couple of weeks, you'll know that I've been consistently criticizing a lot of these comedians that went over to Riyadh, that they went over to Saudi Arabia. They took the money from the Saudi regime and assisted the Saudi regime in doing so. They assisted them politically in their campaign of sports washing everything, not just sports, but also entertainment, video games as well. We saw recently that Saudi Arabia made a huge investment into EA alongside Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. And I've been very vocal about this, and I'm glad that more and more people are starting to speak out against this. More and more people are starting to be concerned, who are realizing, as much as we like to criticize the United States, and as much as it certainly deserves that criticism, it's pretty obvious that a country like Saudi Arabia is just worse than the United States. And so going over there, and again, we're not just talking about comedians going over to Saudi Arabia and performing for the people, performing for the citizens of Saudi Arabia, all of which, of course, the only type of citizen that could even attend this comedy festival in the first place are the ones who aren't in the impoverished areas of Saudi Arabia where they consistently see public executions day in and day out. Not those people, the rich, the upper middle class, to say the very least, the rich people of Saudi Arabia. We're not just talking about going over and performing for them. We're talking about going over and performing for the actual government themselves and assisting them in their political project of making sure that people kind of forget about all of the civil rights abuses that are going on within their country, kind of just forget about all of that. And let's just focus on the fact that Saudi Arabia, hey, they're investing heavily into Newcastle United, and they're making Newcastle United a much better team. So maybe Saudi Arabia is not that bad. So I've been constantly criticizing the comedians who played into this, who assisted the Saudi regime in this project of theirs, and who are constantly refusing to actually respond to the real criticisms that people are having. I made a video last week about Bill Burr. Bill Burr addressed this on his podcast. He's addressed this, I think, twice now. And in neither of those instances did he actually address the arguments that people are making. Instead, what they do is they do this Mott and Bailey logical fallacy thing, where instead of addressing the actual criticisms that people are levying against them, instead he's choosing to defend a much easier to defend position. And I thought Bill Burr had one of the worst responses to this, because his response was he was actually just ignoring the criticisms that people were levying towards him, and instead he was addressing criticisms that I'm not even fully confident were actual criticisms being thrown at him, with the exception of maybe like 6 people on Twitter with 4 followers. But by and large, none of the criticisms that Bill Burr was addressing were actual criticisms that I came across. Most of the criticisms, of course, are the fact that he's going over to Saudi Arabia, taking money from the actual government themselves and assisting the government politically. But instead of addressing those criticisms, he's instead just pretending like what people are really upset about is the fact that there were no women in attendance at the festival, or that he was only there to perform for the government and not actual civilians. So he's addressing some alleged criticisms that he's received that are focused on that, but not the real actual criticisms. So what he's doing is he's replacing the position that he needs to defend, which is pretty hard to defend, and he's replacing it with a much easier to defend position by showing like, oh, there were women there, or there were civilians there. It's a classic Mott and Bailey logical fallacy. But I think Bill Burr has now been beaten by Whitney Cummings, who has one of the worst responses to the Riyadh Comedy Festival that I've seen. And I've heard other people use this argument as well, but not to the extent that she has. So let's go ahead and give her a listen. Maybe, who knows, maybe on my second viewing of the video, I'll actually be convinced of Whitney Cummings' position.
I can see the thing now. Whitney Cummings addresses the festival. You know what? I don't think I need to address it. You guys have it all figured out. I think you guys got it.
Yeah.
You guys, I guess I'm this weirdo. I don't operate under, the idea that every government and their people are the same. But I guess that's like, you think that the people of Saudi Arabia and the Saudi government all share. Okay, so you also believe that the Chinese government and the Chinese people are exactly the same. It's just racism. I didn't.
So obviously not. And in fact, in my videos, I think 2 of my videos, I've explicitly said that if the argument, or if all that happened was that they went over to Saudi Arabia and performed for the civilians, they didn't take money from the government, they just went over there and just, much like you go to the Netherlands, much like you go to Denmark, much like you go to the UK, You just go over there and perform for the people. Then that would be a much more defensible position, but that's not what's happening. You're not going over there and only performing for the citizens. You're not just going over there and performing for the public. You are going over there and also performing for the government. You are taking the government's money and you are assisting the government in their political project of getting the people to avoid and kind of, wash away, wash all of these civil rights abuses that they are engaging in their own country, whether we're talking about male guardianship laws, whether we're talking about public executions, whether we're talking about executing actual activists and journalists, real activists within that country, because they had the audacity to speak against the crown, or they had the audacity to believe in equal rights for women. And it's much more than that as well, because as I said in the previous video, when Saudi Arabia engages in sports washing, it's not just to get the public, to get the people around the world to view them in a much more positive light, even if it's undeservedly so. It's also to try to gain some leverage within the local politics of whatever country it is that they are engaging in sports washing in. So the example that I gave was Newcastle United, a team that was bought by Saudi Arabia, the Public Investment Fund. And now, because of that, because their team is getting bigger, it's getting more popular, they're getting better at the game, they're also attempting to finance local infrastructure within the country to gain some leverage over the local politicians. So when you're responding to the criticisms, allegedly responding to the criticisms, by just claiming that people are being racist, and that's why people are really upset with you going over to Saudi Arabia. The issue is that I don't know, what's that a response to? What argument exactly is that a response to? If I'm arguing that, hey, sports washing is a really bad thing that countries like Saudi Arabia do, because it matters that people within those countries, the denizens of that country, who are going to be the main people who are suffering under this current regime. Again, the main people suffering under the regime of Saudi Arabia are the Saudi Arabian citizens themselves. And so, of course, you always have to separate the government from the people. I agree with Whitney Cummings on this. Yes, separate the government from the people. But in my argument, I am separating the government from the people. I'm doing it pretty explicitly, actually. But anyways, yeah, that's got to be one of the worst ways to address the controversy. It's very 2015, 2016 coded, where you just immediately claim racism whenever someone's making an argument against you. I guess it's like an easy out. But the issue is that probably would have been more effective in 2015 or 2016, when it was a lot more popular to kind of just claim racism for the sake of winning an argument. But nowadays that stuff doesn't really fly anymore. It's not very popular to be, for lack of a better term, not very popular to come off as woke anymore. But anyways, yeah, that was pretty much the gist of her argument. I was going to say that it's worse than Bill Burr's argument, but they're treading the same line, really, even though Bill Burr was less explicit about this just being people being racist. They're both pretty much on the same level of argumentative rigor, I guess, for a lack of a better term. And so, again, it sucks that this is happening. It sucks that they decided to take the money and run. And it sucks that no one seems to be actually addressing the real arguments. The only time I heard someone actually address the argument was Andrew Schultz. And this is all he said.
Maybe just the white countries, because that's what they're all saying, right? They're like, how dare you perform in non-white countries that don't have the exact same rules as us?
Because what they're saying is you're taking money from the government.
Good, my fans get a discount.
There you go.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's pretty much all Andrew Schultz said regarding the situation. But hey, at the very least, he addressed the argument, even if there was no attempt at all to actually respond to it.